Dear goodness, I have to change my Christmas music. I just love Christmas so much, and somehow I forget to change my soundtracks and all. But it is a snowy season, and so I did leave my little snowflakes on because it makes me excited. Today in class, it was just like a outside my window. It was just a snow shower, and it was beautiful. And hopefully, we get so much of it, so much, because I love snow and I love skiing. But anyways, we're not here for that. Welcome to the Progressive Sacred. Here to enjoy the conversation with you and our friends JP and Abby. Ladies and gentlemen, JP and Abby, how the heck are you? Are you
We're
bombarded by
good. How you doing,
snow?
Julio?
Doing well.
We're not getting as much snow in Boston as you are, and we feel robbed.
I
And
feel
Lydia, our daughter, is pretty ticked off about the fact we haven't had
She's
a lot of
very
snow.
upset.
I am with her, and but I'm hoping for the theory that it has been pushed back some. That winter is
Mm.
going, maybe winter will run into like June now.
Okay, I don't
Yeah,
want that, but I want like a ton of snow in February. That
it's
sometimes happens.
it's not
Let's
climate
go.
change. It's summer delay.
There you go. Thank you for that clarification. Again, everybody,
Got
welcome. Excited to have you with us as always. This is a time when we get to share questions and comments, concerns, complaints with one another and discuss. Now, we have a bit of a topic, and we try to stay within topics, but sometimes we branch off to brand new places. With that, if you are with us, do me a favor. Go to the Progressive Sacred site, our page over in on Facebook, and subscribe, share, do all those great, crazy, great things that get the word out and allows us to do what we do. We love to come together and share. It's me. I'm a teacher in the Rochester, New York school district now. JP, who's a professor and a pastor of two progressive churches. Abby, do me a favor. We don't get to stop as often and take a moment and introduce the things that we do.
Mm.
So we can't forget that. So and I'm going from left to right on my screen. So JP, share a little bit. What's going on in your world? How's the school life and whatever it is?
There
Do you
is
do
no
anything?
school life, Julio. There is no school life.
Oh,
I am usually, a teacher at Emmanuel College teaching Hinduism, Buddhism, science and religion, taking students to India when I can get enough students to go to India. But this year I am on a full year sabbatical and I am
It's pretty
writing a
awesome.
book. It's absolutely fabulous. I'm writing the book that I have been dreaming about writing for many, many years, which is Christian theology based in conversation with Hinduism and Buddhism.
ooh. Question, and this just kind of came. It's a random. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna hold off on that because I don't want to take away from Abby. Abby, what's going on? Share with us a
Well,
little bit about your world.
I think Julio, you are not just
Well, I tell
a
just, but
teacher. Yeah, you're not
I
just a
got you.
teacher.
I got you.
You're also a pastor.
Abby, this is about you right now.
Oh,
Just
okay. So
share
you're a
about
pastor.
you.
I am a pastor of two churches, which is kind of a little crazy, but it works because I'm a pastor of two churches part time. One is an emergent church that meets on Sunday night called Grace, not Grace.
Crazy,
It
crazy
is crazy.
community Boston.
Grace Community Boston. And I encourage you to check that out on our website because more than anything, Grace Community Boston is an experiment. It's been an experiment now for 12 years, but it's an experiment and it's exciting to think about different ways to be church. I'm also a church of a traditional informed but quite progressive in theology and their activism as well in West Roxbury, which is a neighborhood in Boston, which is the Stratford Street United Church. And we have a food pantry based in our church. But what I would say it seems like more and more I do besides being a minister is I'm a community organizer. That seems to be a lot of work that I feel called to these days, and that there's a lack of, and pastors can fill that role if they have really supportive churches, and I have really supportive churches. So
What are you
I love that work.
organizing in the community?
One of the things that I'm working on really pretty steadfastly is to do a gun turn-in program. We no longer call it buyback, but for those of you who are familiar, it's a gun buyback, but we don't call it buyback anymore because we can't give a fair market value, but we can give $200 for a semi-automatic weapon. So I'm working really hard to organize that in Boston, and it takes a lot of money. And if you're in the Boston area, we are looking for a place with a parking lot, and I have one church that I have in mind right now.
Nice.
But it's really important to have a parking lot, and that's hard to find in Boston.
Fewer
Interesting.
guns, less death.
Amen. Amen to that. You should maybe connect with there's so many organizations try to do things like that, like stuff with Shane Claiborne or
Right.
you
So
know, like tools like yes.
raw tools.
Raw
So
tools.
amazingly, one of the neat things that is happening is denominations are kind of less and less important. And I don't say that in a mean way. I just say it in as they're dwindling. But part of what's happened with denominations dwindling is that they're just sharing resources now. So raw tools, why am I forgetting his name? He's such a great human being.
Shane Claiborne?
No, his partner,
Yeah.
who really is the one who started raw tools.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, well,
Go for it.
sorry,
We'll
raw
get back
tools.
to you. I'll look up. Go ahead.
You're out of my head. The kindest human being. He's an exceptional person, and he's Mennonite. He is really he's Mennonite, but he's not limited by being a Mennonite. So he's really cross-fertilizing lots of Christian organizations, be it denominations or other umbrella organizations. And so I did a training through the Presbyterian Church, and it was not all Presbyterians. There was no need for it to be Presbyterian. It's just they have the person there who did the training with us, and he very much guided that training and was part of that development.
Mike,
that's right.
Cool.
An incredible human being. And I started an organization with a few others called Christians United Against Gun Violence.
Nice. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Love the work that is happening in Boston, and I can't wait to get back there ASAP. And for those who don't know, my name is Julio, and I am a teacher, an educator, pastor, mentor, and those are the things that I love to do in life to bring flourishment. I think that's the word that I'm sticking with right now, flourishment to those around, and hopefully even including myself, because we need that to be able to move forward healthily. With that, my friends, it was MLK weekend a couple weeks ago, and I got to spend some time with family, which was so awesome, and then get that extra Monday off. And what I continue to ask the people around me is, okay, MLK, that was about 50 years ago. What does it mean to us now? Right? What does it mean? Like I was constantly asking, especially my students, what does it mean? Is it, and some, with honesty would say it's a day off, right? It's a day off school. Cool. That's your honest. Can't hate you for that. Right. But, what is it? What does it mean currently? Is it losing its vibe? Is it losing the current that it, and the wave that it once had, or the power that it once had? Thoughts? And we can expand on that.
I hope not. So when the kids came forward in my church, I have a bunch of little kids in Boston. And when they came forward for MLK that Sunday, I said to a whole bunch of them, do you know, and I didn't even use his name, so I was kind of like teasing them. I was like, do you know what MLK is? And they all were looking at it, and they were like, oh, we know who he is. And these are all elementary school kids. So we're still doing something in elementary school, at least in the Boston school system. All of the kids told me about segregated water fountains and buses. And they didn't use the word boycott, but they knew something about the bus boycott. And they talked about, they used words like peace, and maybe they didn't use the word nonviolence, but there was this big overarching understanding of who he was. And for me as a preacher, I love celebrating MLK Day because it's just it lines up at a perfect time. There's no big kind of holiday going on. You can always do it. But I use Martin Luther King's writings throughout the year.
Yeah.
He has some of his writings are the best for calls to worships and prayers, and but I'm a big devotee.
He had excellent theology, and
He
he
really
wrote
did.
extremely well. So, and if you have excellent theology that's well written, you can turn that into liturgy pretty easily. So,
And that, of course, is not to say that people who aren't prolific writers don't matter. It just, in my mind, it makes it much easier to carry on his work because there's such an enormous body of writing and you can pick it up and use it in lots of powerful ways. I've even seen children's books where they just have different parts of all of his different kind of, and not just the I Have a Dream speech. It's a
Right.
great speech, but that was
Great
a
speech.
blip for him, but a
Right.
blip for him, right? In all of his preaching. And I've seen books that pick out different ones of his quotes and put it in context with pictures. And it's just, I mean, I find him, I, for me, Martin Luther King is first, Jr. is first a Christian. I, I'm not saying that for him. I'm saying as I connect with him. He's first a Christian to me and then American. So for me,
Mm.
Martin Luther King Jr. Day is honestly for me, I feel about it the way maybe um, a devout Catholic who's really connected with a saint's teaching would feel about that Saint's Day.
Mm. Okay.
So for, I mean, in all honesty, and I'm not, maybe I'm not making the right parallel, but
No, I
for
think
me, he is a
it
great
vibes.
Christian leader and thinker for me, and it's really important for me to have that day.
it's interesting. For me, the analogy is to a Hebrew prophet. I think he bears all the
Hmm.
characteristics of a Hebrew prophet.
Mm.
He spoke
Hmm.
kind of, I think, accurately discerned God's will for the culture, revealed God's will to the culture, and then worked to bring
Hmm.
the culture into line with God's will, which was more just, more inclusive, more loving, more fair. And so I feel like, to me, he's a modern day prophet. And to me, his writings are as scriptural as many of the writings that
Hmm.
are in the Bible. They might have come later after the canon was closed, but that doesn't mean they're less inspired than much of the writings we find in the Bible.
Hmm.
I love this idea that you both just shared. I feel like in my head I'm marrying them together, like the
Hmm.
married couple you are.
We are.
This whole this modern like almost like a saint day, right? Like this is a day
Hmm.
we celebrate this beautiful, wonderful saint, right? Not a perfect human being, but someone
Hmm.
who did great for the cause of Christ, for the cause of humanity, and also how JP you mentioned this modern day prophet, and when I hear the word prophet, from many mouths, it makes me shiver, it makes me quiver because it is constantly misused. I feel as
Hmm.
it is,
Hmm.
we're quick to say, oh, this guy, he's very prophetic, and oh, I love his preaching, and I love, and like
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, easy, because we're putting labels on people that were often very dangerous. Where often, I don't know that any prophet said, "Yeah, that's what I want to do when I grow up."
No.
Or they were like, when called, most of them ran away and hated this call to what activism they were part of, right?
Hmm.
Which then you look at MLK's life and then say, I think even towards his, how many say towards the end of his life, he was like almost knowing that this was not going to
Hmm.
end well.
Hmm.
Some may even say that he almost felt like the end of his life, the day before on some of those last speeches.
I've gone up to the
Absolutely.
mountain with
Right.
you. I mean, I've gone up to the mountain. I may not get to the promised land, but I've gone up to that mountain. Yep.
Preach, and it's kind of like it sends chills down my back. And I was like, that is a hard road. The man walked many hard roads, but that right
Yeah.
there is something to say, like,
I have three things about MLK which I think are really important that people don't know about. And for me, they're so important because it shows what a human he was.
Yeah.
One was that in the very beginning of the Birmingham bus boycott, he bought a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he writes about it. It's so powerful. And why I think it's so powerful is because he didn't want to do it. His
No.
family was being threatened. There were bombs being thrown in his house. He had little children. He was getting death threats. He just didn't want to do it. And he bought a gun.
Mhm.
Now, he had a moment of reckoning with God at that gun,
Mhm.
around that gun at his kitchen table. I think much the way Jesus has a reckoning in the Garden of Gethsemane. But I think that's really powerful because it allows us to know that, yes, he had an incredible ability to preach. He had incredible leadership, but he was just terrified like the rest of
Right.
us.
Right.
He didn't want to die.
Right. The other thing that I love about MLK, which I think is a tale to modern day preacher prophets, oh, I'm just doing the word of God. You know how many suits that man owned? And he writes about it.
Because he was accused of stealing money from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and putting it into his own bank account, which is, inevitable. He's going to be accused
Yes.
of that. But he was just pointing out how few possessions he owned and how little money he had. He lived very simply.
He really walked the walk and talked the talk. A lot like our current Pope, who really still lives in utter simplicity in solidarity with the poor. And I really admire that about MLK as well.
You talk about Pope
And then
Francis.
the other thing, the other thing that I would say about MLK that, and of course people don't know everything he spoke about and did. I mean,
Right.
we all have different people that we're fascinated by and we know more about. But for me, as he is one of kind of those great inspiring Christian leaders for me and guides, I've read most of everything he wrote and spoke. But the integration was part of what he was working on. But that was like the tiniest part. The Poor People's Campaign, anti-nuclear weapons, protesting the Vietnam War. I mean, the guy was so consistent following the Christian ethic laid out in the Hebrew prophets and by Jesus in the Newer Testament that
And it was dangerous. It was very dangerous. Mm-hmm. And he sensed that he was going to die, and he died for his courage. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's kind of an exemplar or an example of the same reason that Jesus died. I think if you're too much God in a godless world, that godless world will kick you out. Just like we've got an allergy to God.
I want to take a moment and give some shout outs. Hey, Michaela, see that you're on. What's going on? Anybody else? I see there's people out there. Feel free to come say hello. Join the conversation. We're talking a bit of just MLK the past couple of weeks, and as we're leading to February and observing Black History Month and things like that. But, I've been talking lots with students and just working this whole what does this mean? MLK spoke. Are we now free? Are we now equal? What does that mean, right? And and some great answers from the minds of youth who say, we have the good discussion and say, all right, changes happen, but there's still more changes to take place. Real quick, you had mentioned something, and as we talked about MLK's death, I think of this. I've seen this in several places. I've currently read a poem that had this theme, and one. Have you seen the new Wonder Years?
The new Wonder Years.
Remember the old school TV show?
I loved the old school. So I loved the old school. I haven't seen the new school.
They remade it. And now it takes place from the perspective of a young Black youth, right? So the main character.
So interesting.
And I don't want to ruin too much because I think that if you haven't, you should go check it out. But there's a point where it takes place where they all find out MLK was shot. And I'm like, wait, so I have not,
Mm.
I felt that I have not seen the displayed or portrayed the experience of the community at that
Mm.
moment, right? You always hear and but
Mm.
that, and it was moving. So
Good for
yeah,
them. Oh, that's cool.
yeah, yeah, and
That's
so
really
Exactly.
cool.
what they did with it
Interesting.
is really artistic and really really cool. Um, Go ahead. You were gonna say something?
I went to, this is totally random, but my senior year before graduation at the end of exams, senior week, we decided to go to Graceland, my roommates and I. It was super stinking fun. So we went to Memphis, but while we were there, because we were the nerdy type, we looked up everything interesting in Memphis. Had no idea that the National Civil Rights Museum is there in Memphis. It's excellent. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Oh, there's
Sorry, I
go
hit a
ahead
button.
and check it out. It's excellent. But what they did is he was shot, I believe it was called the Lorraine Hotel, and he was shot on the kind of balcony. It was sort of like two-story motor lodge, sort of.
Is a motel.
Yeah, it was a motel,
Yeah.
and they made that into the museum. And the room that he was staying in has sort of been kind of stayed the same, and they've never scrubbed his blood off of the cement
Wow. That's pretty brutal.
because it's covered. It's kind of like a porch. And I don't remember how they sort of prevented it. And I'm not somebody who wants to see blood at all. And something about it was, I don't know,
Powerful.
really, really powerful. And I don't know about that conversation, what happened with the people or figuring out what they were going to do with that space, how to keep it. But that was really, really powerful as a reminder that he like Jesus, I'm not saying he was Jesus, but prophets don't want to do
Can we
what they
say in a
got to
way,
do.
in a small way, can we say he was?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I agree.
Like anyone else who's doing the work, who's doing you know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely. But I'm just saying, if I was called to do the work, I'd be like, okay, I'll do so much. But I
oh,
don't want people threatening my home. No blood.
right.
Like, thanks very much, but no thanks.
I think, and we've talked about this in our programs before, and when we talk about things like Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
examples of how you just mentioned people called to hard places and hard things. And I'm like, because there's so many who say, "Oh, I'm 100% for Jesus," and and I'm like, you don't know
Mhm.
what that means.
Yeah.
Like
That's dangerous. That's dangerous talk.
Jesus himself said, if there's any other way,
Yeah.
Yeah,
please,
Take
go.
this cup away
like,
from me.
take this cup. Like, if there's any other way, let's go. There are things in my life that I would not wish on my worst enemy that I've gone
Yeah.
through, and it's the hardest thing. Sure, I grew from it, good came from it, but I say, if there's any other way, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I can say, sure, for the cause of Christ, for the cause of freedom, for the cause of others and people and love and community, great, all things that I love and admire. But to say, sure, at the cost of my home being bombed, at the cost of, now we got to wait and talk. We got to think this through, and that's where I'm going, kicking and screaming, and it's going to take
Mhm.
a giant shift of heart. So
And when James and John and their mom were competing for leadership of the disciples, Jesus said to them, "Are you able to drink from the cup that I drink from?"
Mm.
And then they backed down a little bit. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty
Mm-hmm.
intimidating question. And the fact is that Martin Luther King, when Jesus said to him, "Are you able to drink from the cup that I drink from?" Martin Luther King drank from that cup, as did, many, many Christian martyrs throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a courage that I admire and that I'm never going to get the opportunity to express here in my comfortable suburb.
I love there's a story. Oh, sorry. Go, Julio.
no, I was just thinking. This came to mind. This little analogy, like, I'm ready to drink from Peter's cup.
Mhm.
I'll walk with Jesus. Give me a knife and I'll slice somebody's ear off, right?
Yeah.
But chances are, if it's going to be, if it is going to cost me a great death, I may deny. I don't know, put in that situation. But, going back to your statement of that prophetic thing, like, you don't know that cup that they drink it from, and
Yeah.
one that
Yeah.
if we had to, like, absolutely, we do it with soiled pants, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, so I call it being a happy Christian.
Yeah,
I'm always
of
like,
course.
what is this happy Christian?
Yeah.
Like, I met Jesus and things got screwed up. Like,
Yeah.
I had to actually care about other people and like pray for my enemies. Oh man,
Right.
that I'm like terrible at. So like the happy Christian part, do I have I discovered a deeper joy? Have I discovered more meaning, more purpose? Do I feel less alone? Yes. But the happy, I mean, we always go back to this, right? Shallow stuff, Christian.
Yeah.
And there's one story I always think about with Mother Teresa. Because, like, all right, listen, I think Mother Teresa is great. But, like, in some ways, it wasn't as scary, right? She got to go hang out with poor people in India. Like, nobody was threatening her life. She's just a little tiny nun, like, creeping around with poor people, nobody cares about. Yeah, not so much. There's this incredible story about her. And by the way, if anybody thinks I'm like not appreciating Mother Teresa, that is not true at all. I think she's amazing. I'm just kind of using this as a foil to MLK, right? Who was more of this kind of, there were guns on him. Well, there's a story about a whole bunch of nuns who work with Mother Teresa who came back. And, they had like done their rounds as they always did and were caring for people. And then they said, there was this man, we couldn't do it. And do you know why they couldn't do it? Because they were vomiting every time they went near him. And not because they were uncompassionate, unloving people. They were, but their gag reflex, the man had maggots throughout him. And so the story is that Mother Teresa went and she was able to do it. And so these fellow nuns said to her, well, how did you do that? Because of course they were horrified that they couldn't do it. I'm sure they were deeply ashamed. And her response, typical Mother Teresa, was, oh, I just kept on thinking he was Jesus, so it was okay.
Yep.
I mean, that to me is just as radical. I don't want to be bombed out. I don't want to vomit. I don't want to smell nasty stuff. I don't want to see maggots. And when I'm doing volunteer work, I don't want it to be too hot. I don't like heat. So, I'll do some painting, but please let it be in the shade. I mean, seriously, let's be honest about this.
Yeah, totally. Um,
But
real.
I'm happy for Jesus.
I was saying just the challenge of being aware of suffering and concerned about suffering, and then being aware of injustice and wanting there to be more justice and working for that is just
It's
extremely
hard.
frustrating.
Oh, there's Crystal. Hey, Crystal.
Saying what's up to Crystal, what's going on? And also, Michaela writes, to me, human nature feels a lot like pain, avoidance, and I feel like Jesus does the opposite. He really leaned into the pain and embraced it as part of a whole human experience.
Wow, that's super insightful.
Super insightful.
Wow.
I'm going to push back just a tiny bit. I'm still stuck on that whole, like, it's just fresh on my mind. The whole, like, if there's any other way, can we go that route? Like, and no, yes, he did. He is so countercultural. He is, that's the thing I love about Jesus. Just the very same things we're talking about MLK, right? And another name that came to my head and I'll share in a moment, but that one, when we talk about Jesus, the deity, we also talk about his human experience, and like, so he's experiencing the fullness of it, right? But I don't know, he was leaning into it as in, like, I don't know. We go back and forth.
So Julio, can we say both and?
Yes.
Can we say
That's
can
kinda,
we say we don't think suffering in itself is redemptive? We don't want someone to have to lean into pain into the pain of struggling with an addiction, the pain of their child being sick, the pain of grief. However, what I love about what Michaela writes, Michaela, I'm finding this statement really powerful. It's going to stick with me for a while. Is if it is part of the human experience and Jesus found himself right there in the midst of the pain, opposed to fleeing from it, he leaned into it. And if we think about grief, I know this is just a microcosm example. The only way to deal with grief is to lean into it. You have to go through it.
Yeah.
You have to go through grief. You can't flee it. And so I agree, like Julio, I want there to be another way. I want people fighting for justice right now not to have their homes bombed out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want us to have to learn through pain. But how do we get the courage to lean into it when it's in front of us? I don't know. I run
think
away.
You definitely helped me to see Michaela's statement in fuller, and thank you. Yeah, I really like it a lot. You were saying something, JP?
I think how we interpret the crucifixion, resurrection has a lot to say in this, because I see, I mean, some people see Jesus suffering on the cross as our salvation, the source of our salvation. And I don't. I think it was horrible human suffering inflicted by humans on a perfectly beautiful human. So I don't think it was redemptive in any way whatsoever. I think that God was condemning the suffering that we inflict on each other through the cross. But God also said, oh, by the way, what you do to each other, the horrible things that y'all do to each other, that doesn't get the last word. My healing power is greater than your power to inflict suffering, which God established through the resurrection. So we are called to lean into suffering. When we see suffering, to respond to it and try to alleviate it. But that doesn't mean we try to seek it out. We certainly don't try to inflict it on each other. What we should be trying to give each other is healing, and ultimately give each other resurrection.
But if you can't lean into it and you need to go sit on your couch in your PJs, please do that too. Right? Like I don't think John Paul, I don't think Michaela, I would hope that MLK would go, like, kids, I want you to live a life like me, my 4 children. I want you to suffer and have bomb threats. No. But then also there are moments where we can't avoid it.
Oh, we need Sabbath. We all need Sabbath. Jesus
well, not just Sabbath. I think we all need a little denial and avoidance on some days.
I mean, Jesus was always going off to pray and meditate.
Yeah,
and
I'm going to use a word that I have come to dislike a lot. Maybe if it's your calling.
Oh.
If you
I
feel
hate that word.
led to,
I hate that
but
word too.
I hate it. I do. I've come to, because so many are like, I feel called to go, and I'm just like,
Julio, I so hear you.
I feel called to go serve in the Dominican Republic. Can you pay for my trip? Like, then I feel called to go and travel France. Like, I will go and, I mean, and no, joking, tongue in cheek, but I've heard too much of people and their calling, and I'm like, are you sure? Or are you sure that that's not just your heart's desire? Or this feel like, I think you need to really meditate on that, right? So, right, I don't think that, I don't know that you're
hard.
right. MLK's not saying like we need everybody to go and sacrifice themselves. I don't know.
Yeah, no, the calling part. Yeah, I'm with you.
So I'll say this: another parallel theologian who I've loved and also lived a very similar, close parallel life to MLK, Bonhoeffer. And so you have even books have been written about Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the parallels of Martin Luther King, the persecution, and even the the radicalness. I'll throw that word then. Radicalness of their that is their lives, right? Bonhoeffer, who at a point was about to pull the trigger on a Hitler, right, and said, "No, this is not the way," right? Um, I don't know. So there are a lot of people who are like who walk that line, and I don't know that
We
that's
should
what
tell
they.
people who Bonhoeffer is, that he was a part of the confessing church movement in Germany,
Mhm.
that he stood up against the Nazis, particularly in the church, and that he went to a concentration camp and died there. But he, life together, if you, I mean, a lot of, I feel like theology isn't always fun to read or accessible. Life together is a joy to read.
And the
I,
cost of discipleship,
you think the cost of
which
discipleship
which
too?
Oh
he
yeah,
paid, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah. So I've only read Life Together, and
Right.
I just, it was a joy to read.
Those to me are good theology books. Those are the books that I'm like, oh, let's
Mhm.
roll. Okay, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. Me.
I'm. It's like reading scripture and then getting to like Chronicles, and you're like, oh, this part, man, whatever. This seems kind of like just factual stuff. Oh wait, here's a part where there's a crazy war happening, and this person who's living a wild life, but and then sometimes people like romanticize it and make him like this giant hero. I was like, oh wait, remember this is a real person who then suffered and died. The
Mm.
cost of discipleship is, it's a heavy cost. Um,
Let's throw in two female martyrs since we've only talked about males so far.
let's go.
Uh, Dorothy Stang was a sister of Notre Dame de Namur who started
Mm.
this college, Emmanuel College, where I teach, and she was
Who
in
was that?
Brazil. Dorothy Stang.
Okay, not to be confused with Dorothy Day. I
No,
was
no,
Yeah.
no.
like, okay, go ahead.
And she was in Brazil, and she was working with indigenous persons
Hmm.
and trying to protect their habitat, their homes, from the logging interests. Of course, the logging interests had a lot of money, and they also have very secure. They have security forces that were very capable of violence. And Dorothy Stang was murdered. So, and she definitely died due to her commitment to her faith and the justice, the desire for justice that her faith instilled in her. And then another one I want to mention is Sophie Scholl, who was a
Mm.
German Protestant
Hmm.
college student who also stood up against the Nazis, and she was for religious reasons,
Yeah, she was
not
amazing.
yeah, not just because she was just a secular activist, but for specifically religious reasons. And she was executed by the Nazis for her activism.
There, there are lots of,
And many more.
yeah. As long as we're talking about reading, I would, we put out Bonhoeffer's Life Together and The Cost of Discipleship. I would also, if you're going to read one thing by MLK, I would say Letter from a
Oh
Birmingham
yeah.
Jail. That's my favorite, I think, of all of his writing, or speeches, is collective work. I would also say that there are some really great books out there. If you're somebody who feels inspired or learns from other people's stories, I'm one of those people. I learn a lot more about how to walk in this life by learning about how others have. There are some really great books out there about saints, modern day saints, and it's not just limited to those who've been canonized by the Catholic Church. It's not just limited to Christians.
Mhm.
And those books have been really powerful for me to read, and to read about some really incredible people who, in their, maybe it's just a little tiny corner of the world, did incredible work
I
and
am.
really helped humanity.
I'm a huge fan of Strength to Love, and it's a
Mm,
MLK
yeah.
book, but I believe it was written by his wife.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, really? I didn't hear. I didn't know that.
mhm.
That's interesting. Greta
And
Scott is also Greta Scott King. She's got it going on too. as one
If
bright
you're
woman.
out there and have some recommendations, put them on the message. We'd love to hear and we'd love to give you a shout out and hear from you. Let's connect on the conversation. Um, little tracing back to what you're mentioning. You mentioned multiple other theologians whose life were taken due to the cost of discipleship, the cost of what their
Mm,
calling in life was, and one of the things um, I feel that connects most or all of them. It was their way that they were driven to their purpose was for humanity as a whole. It wasn't
mm,
a I'm gonna do this now. Join my clan, my group, my church, my
mm,
temple. And which then brings me to thinking of people like Mahatma Gandhi and
mm,
such. And beautiful people, beautiful,
mm.
beautiful people who walk the walk, talk the talk. Wish that there was probably another way to go about peace and the freedom of oppression. And it wasn't a. By the way, I'm doing this so that one day your kids could go to my youth group and have a large budget in which they could get a trampoline and a bunch of bouncy balls.
Yeah, these people are
Yes,
universalists. They
yes.
love everybody equally. They
Correct.
love everybody. I mean, and that makes them symbols of God because God created everybody. God loves
Mm,
everybody absolutely, which is to love everybody equally. And these universalists, like Martin Luther King, he wasn't he wanted black white reconciliation so that there would be one whole, not division. Or Mahatma Gandhi, who wanted Muslim Hindu reconciliation and Brahmin Dalit reconciliation, for example. They were all universalists. They loved everybody equally. And I think it's extremely important to hold them up as examples and heroes, especially in this day and
mm.
age when we have so many sectarian, divisive leaders who are gathering power by dividing segments of their population against other segments of their population.
Yeah, so we got it. We got to go there, right?
Yeah.
If your faith, and I'm not going to say your faith, I'm just going to speak about
Lifestyle.
Christianity. No,
Okay.
I'm just going to go ahead and speak about Christianity because
Go ahead.
I'm a follower of Jesus. So if your Christianity is making your world smaller, is making your social world smaller, is making your kind of worldview smaller, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I would say, if we studied all of these people's lives in real, like with the focus of understanding how their worlds opened, they're all of them have in common this expanse. We should be in our faith journeys like the Big Bang. Our world, our experience of God should continue to make our world expand. It should always be expanding in every direction. Now, that sometimes gets exhausting. So we want to go on the couch and not care for, a day or a week or, whatever the Sabbath we need is. But, you know, Gandhi started with wanting Indian independence from England. That led him to more complications within India. MLK began with just trying to get the bus system in Birmingham to include Black folks so that they could sit down. That led him to the Vietnam War and protesting it.
I think if you really believe in God, and if God is the God of the cosmos, the God of all things, that faith should make you broad minded, not narrow minded. You should
Yeah.
be interested in everything because God is in everything and everything is of God. So you should be broad minded. And I don't understand how belief in God can make you narrow minded.
Yeah, and I don't understand why you can only hang out with. This is the latest thing that's come up in my world is people being really offended by how teenage girls dress and not wanting to expose their daughters to that immodest dress. And I was like, really? Like, You're concerned about
Can you clarify a little bit?
The general conversation with a good friend of mine who was experiencing this and trying to work it out was essentially this woman in her world, entire energy as a follower of Jesus was concerned about what her daughter was being exposed to at public school. And one of the biggest things her daughter was being exposed to is girls who are showing cleavage and wearing really short shorts. Now, do I think there is an important conversation to have with really all genders, but I think it's particularly on younger girls around why do we want to show our bodies? Do you want to be objectified? Absolutely. Always open for that conversation. Am I really concerned about my daughter seeing that? Like that's going to make her ungodly.
Less human. Less.
That is, I think, a real example of like shutting down and getting smaller. Opposed to, I wonder why that girl's dressing that way. Is she dressing that way because it makes her feel good? Is she dressing that way because she has low self-esteem? Is she dressing that way because she's way more body positive than I am and not worried and just gotten liberated from that? There are so many more questions.
I don't know. Yeah, y'all didn't know me when I was at my biggest, as far as but I went on an extreme dieting and exercising journey, and I'll tell you what, I bet you that the next time I went to Puerto Rico, my swimsuit was smaller than. It's like I got very positive about or whatever, but I don't know. There's a different reason. Maybe it made some people stumble. I don't know, but I know that it is a giant conversation in which we've lightly talked about and can go deeper, but in how in those conversations how unfair also it is between genders and what we have guilty have been part of a shame culture and a way of like what is it, double standards and shaming of both of people all over, right? And so, but then sometimes in our Christianity, in our faith, we get so caught up in those things, and I'm just like, I really I don't have time to care that much. Like I care for the safety and the health of the persons involved,
Sure.
but right, like
Sure.
right now, like this is also happening where like the poor are being oppressed, the wrong people are being persecuted, da 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 da,
There
on and
are
on and
kids who
on.
don't have food to eat.
And so like, this person's clothed. It may not be as clothed as you wish they were, maybe. I don't know, but that's a topic for another season or another situation. And as we start to wind down and come to our final moments, I wanted to see what we thought about. We still see, as we've been talking this whole time, we see how there's still many pieces that keep us down, that systems of oppression and whatnot. We see the ripple effect that MLK created, right? And we hope that it continues to encourage others to do something, right? Not saying to stand up and now, if you want to
Be
start a march,
inspired.
sure, but like we're not going on the radicalism of being a target or also, being maybe a Malcolm X, which we didn't touch on that. But to do something, we're called to do something, right? What are things
Can I,
that Go ahead,
can I,
JP.
can I give an example? Julio. So there was a fabulous editorial in the Washington Post this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about universalism, we've been talking about reconciliation, and we've been talking about other religions. And we've been talking about great big, leaders who died for their faith and whatnot. But this is a fabulous
And whatnot, just died for their faith.
Yeah, this is a heartwarming example.
Mm.
And what happened was a U.S. vet came to a mosque, and this vet, when he came to the mosque, he just looked very uptight, very angry. And people, you would make eye contact with people, and eventually, some people in the mosque, they sat him down, they had tea with him, and they talked to him, and he started opening up some, and they invited him for a meal, and he came for a meal, and eventually, now the editorial didn't say this or not, but eventually they just kept on being very, very kind to this withdrawn man who was a combat vet and had PTSD. And he eventually confessed to them that he had come to their mosque. The first time he had come to their mosque was on a reconnaissance mission to blow it up.
Oh.
His intention was to blow up the mosque. And they found that out, and they didn't kick him out because he had become a member of their community. And in fact, he remained a member of their community. And today he's the president of the mosque. So these people, and he told them, I've been fighting Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan for decades, and I had come to hate them. And I came to your mosque to scout it out, to blow it up, and you showed me so much love that I couldn't do it. And he joined the mosque, and today he is the president of the mosque. So there's a story where, maybe we don't have to be a world famous leader. Maybe we can just love in our own local community and change and save lives through that.
The end.
Amen.
No, and and that's kind of where I know that we're not going to come to a simple solution and an answer, right? We're throwing questions to discuss and connecting with the people who join on our live stream and those who may write to us. But at the same time, like at the end, like that's it. That's practical. That's something we all can do. And from time to time, I think it will create a big change. But from time to time, you'll hear the stories of, for example, the one you just shared, right? Well, one thing we can all do is to love in our communities, love in where we're at in our workplace, right? Where often it may not be radical, but often it can be very hard to love. Um,
Mm.
It's like loving somebody who had intended to kill you.
right,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
right.
That's amazing.
Friends, it is 5 o'clock. People start
And we're ready to go to wrestling.
nights
Isaac has a
wrestling.
big, meet that we're going to go to right now. So,
That's
I
awesome.
did wear my garb today.
I am wearing my guayabera. And why did I wear it
Your white
today?
what? Your
My
white
white,
what?
not my white, is my guayabera. It's
What the
a
guayabera?
so you see it
You
in
got it.
it's a
Oh, I didn't know that those had names.
I have an Indian
all
friend who
right.
does
Now my
Ayurveda.
earpiece fell out, so I'm just gonna ramble for a little bit. It's commonly found in islands, definitely
Yeah,
Puerto Rico. Uh, it's more old
I
school.
had no idea. Yeah,
It's
yeah, no,
it's
it's
more
totally
old
old school.
school. So I wear it now, almost like bringing sexy back. But it's I feel like there's students who I often are like, oh yeah, my grandpa wear those. Like that's
Right,
so
right,
cool.
right. That's
And
so
I'm like, oh
cool.
yeah, I know. And they think like I'm old. Well, maybe I am old. But we had a student who was a crown Miss Puerto Rico, and she comes from our. I'm talking about like of all Rochester, big old crown, and will be traveling throughout the state and to Puerto
Oh my
Rico
goodness,
representative, and she is coming from our school, and so
that's awesome.
I intentionally wore this, and You should
Oh,
have
that's
seen the
awesome.
giant flag that I waved around in the gym
Oh, that's awesome.
when she spoke to our students so very eloquently and
Oh, that's
about with a
awesome.
great message. And so I went
Hmm.
old school, but friends, enjoy wrestling. Those who are out there, thanks for joining us. Continue to write us. Continue to hit us up with topics that you're interested in. Thank you. And as JP mentioned, go out and make a difference. And if you are, make sure that you're making a difference. That maybe it's not continuing the hurt and the pain that it's already there. Maybe I don't know. Go love.
Love. Go
Go
love.
love.
Better.
With that, JP, Abby, any last words?
Nope, just peace.
Progressive Christianity is on the move.
And just peace be with you. God bless you.
Nicole Lawless, what's up? She sends a little heart. We're gonna end and leave your heart up there and say thanks for that. Bye, everybody.
Nuts.
Hey,
I'll let God
bendiciones.
tell it.
That's what you wanted me to say?
Yeah, I love
Bendiciones. Bye.
I